Let me tell you something. When women are actively choosing to decenter men, it's not about exclusion, but about reclaiming agency, dismantling patriarchal conditioning, and redefining success and self-worth on their own terms. It's Women's History Month, and today I'm going to be talking about why women are unlearning the need for male validation. What could the world look like if women were socialized to center themselves and other women as a default? Not in opposition to men, but in pursuit of self-actualization. The idea of women actively choosing to decenter men is that it's not just an act of personal liberation, it's a necessary cultural reset that exposes how deeply patriarchy has conditioned women to see themselves primarily in relation to men. Look at it this way. How much of your life has been shaped by seeking male validation without even realizing it? A clear example would be, think about how you dress or behave. Has it always been based on men's opinions or your own? Most times we do this subconsciously. When women are actively choosing to decenter men, it's not about exclusion, but about reclaiming agency, dismantling patriarchal conditioning, and redefining success, relationships, and self-worth on their own terms. So today we're going to discuss a myriad of things that have been portrayed, whether in the media, in conversations online, or just how women's view of men and how we've been conditioned to consistently center men is now taking a back seat where women are reclaiming who they are. The wake-up call we all need is, why are we even talking about this? We're talking about the unlearning happening right now, where women are stepping into their power and decentering men from their lives. Before we ride into the sunset of which most women are now basking in its light, let's take a step back to the good old days and reflect how women and young girls were conditioned to think. Why do women center men in the first place? Let's talk about the context and social conditioning that happened many years before I became a concept. For generations, women were taught that their value comes from being wanted by men. The history of women being socialized to seek male validation tells us this, whether it was in dating, career, or beauty standards, and how patriarchy has benefited from women centering men, free emotional labor, prioritizing male comfort, and the hidden ways this shows up in our everyday lives. Back then, it was changing your behavior around men and prioritizing male opinions. Now, let's talk about the invisible cage, how society conditions women to seek male approval. This messaging starts early. Think about Disney princesses, rom-coms, or family expectations or religion. Little girls are growing up having a purpose to one day be chosen, accepted, and kept for the rest of their lives. Women are praised for being desirable, agreeable, and self-sacrificing. We see this in Ballerina Farm, Nara Smith, and other trad wife influencers. This idea that going back to the good old days is what women are supposed to aspire to. And social media has kind of had a hand in this, where we have now pick-me culture that consistently reinforces the idea that women's worth has to be tied to male perception. And most people are seeing through all of that BS, but others are not. And so the unspoken rule becomes, the more men approve of you, the more valuable you are. I will be remiss as a Black woman to not talk about the different change, same system concept, where we can recognize how white and Black women experience this condition differently. And yes, there are key differences in how white women and Black women are conditioned to center men, largely due to the intersections of race, gender, and historical context. While patriarchy is the overarching system that encourages women to prioritize men, the way it manifests varies based on racial dynamics. For white women, traditional patriarchal conditioning has often been tied to ideas of femininity that emphasize submission, domesticity, and the nuclear family structure. Historically, white women were positioned as the moral and emotional caretakers of society, responsible for maintaining social order through marriage, motherhood, and their proximity to white men's power. And this can be viewed in three different ways: traditional gender roles, marriage as security, and white womanhood as the ideal. We'll start with traditional gender roles. White women have often been socialized to embody soft femininity and purity, making male approval central to their value. Marriage as security. Many white women were historically taught that their success and survival depended on securing and maintaining a husband, tying their economic stability to men. White womanhood as an ideal. In Western societies, we see that white women's desirability and worth have been largely measured by their ability to attract and keep men, particularly white men, in positions of power. Look at this in the contrast of the differences between how white women are conditioned and how black women are conditioned. When it comes to white women, they are viewed as a prize to be won. Historically, white women were trained to embody soft femininity, purity, and domesticity. We can see that in most religions, which continues today, where children are taught very young to focus on marriage and male validation as markers of success. And in other terms, negating that education can just be as important. The fear of being too much or too independent in relationships. Now, when we look at Black women, they're viewed as the emotional backbone, socialized to prioritize both men and community over self, expected to be strong, nurturing, and endlessly supportive, even at the cost of their own well-being. The contradiction here becomes be independent, but not too independent, or you'll be labeled intimidating and undesirable. And there's so many Black women I can attest to who have faced these experiences, and we see it in the media. I've said all these things, and some of you are wondering, well, I doubt any women watching this do not understand what decentering men is. But if there's a woman out there who has never questioned that, I can explain it. What does it mean when we say decenter men? This section, I'll be clearing up the misconceptions. When we say decenter men, we're not saying hate or exclude men. We're saying prioritize yourself first. And that means shifting focus from seeking validation to self-acceptance, prioritizing male comfort to setting boundaries, and structuring your life around male approval to creating personal fulfillment. Okay, I've talked about what decentering men actually looks like. Now I want to talk about the cost of centering men. What happens when you live for male validation? The first thing is wasted energy on self-doubt, people-pleasing, and a fear of rejection, emotional exhaustion from constantly managing men's egos and expectations, shrinking ourselves in the workplace, friendships, and personal ambitions, and the anxiety of being chosen instead of focusing on choosing yourself. Now, I want to address just a little bit of the pushback that people, especially women, have been experiencing when it comes to us choosing to decenter men. The usual criticism and rebuttals are not based on nuance or understanding. I want to try and clear that up. Some of the examples are, but don't we need men? Of course we do. But it's about understanding balance and not exclusion. Isn't this just feminism going too far? No, it's about autonomy, not opposition. What about relationships? Healthy relationships happen when both partners are whole individuals. Now let's talk about how to start unlearning male validation. First one is notice when you're seeking male approval. Number 2, ask yourself, what do I actually want? Number 3, shift your focus to building the life you desire. Number 4, strengthen connections with women. Number 5, set boundaries unapologetically.
You will never know how great you could have been had you only just spent less time focusing on men. When women genuinely ask me how to decenter men, I start by letting them know that no man ever has asked another man how to decenter women. The reason for that is while you spent your adolescent years building a hypothetical life for a hypothetical man, he was out there living his real life. That man has hobbies and interests and passions for things that you have never heard of that span decades deep. And you have hundreds of pins on Pinterest planning a wedding for a man you haven't met yet. And that is not to shame you. That is just for you to see how much of your capacity has been sucked dry by men, even when you're not in a relationship with them. That is not how they move and operate. You want to decenter men? Start acting like a man. Go get yourself a life. Go do something for you and see how it all changes.
Love that video so much because she talks about how you need to start living your life like a man. Because how many of us have these Pinterest board, myself included, of what your wedding day will look like for a hypothetical man that you haven't even met. And yet he's out there somewhere doing his thing and living his life, investing in his hobbies and interests. And I'm here planning a wedding that I don't even know if I'll have. So, what are the real life impacts and benefits of decentering men? You'll have more fulfilling relationships, friendships, and community with other women. Your increased self-confidence and personal freedom will abound. You'll break free from toxic dynamics and societal pressures. The ultimate goal would be women realizing that self-worth isn't found in male approval, but in reclaiming yourself. So how do you start decentering men in your own life? First of all, small but powerful mindset shifts. Practical habits like making decisions for yourself, cultivating self-worth outside of relationships. And third, community building with other women and non-men. In conclusion, this isn't about pushing men away. It's about bringing yourself back to the center of your own life and understand where you have unconsciously centered men and how you can reclaim that energy for yourself. Remember, you don't need male validation. You never did. I'll see you guys in the next one.